There we go.
Good to go. There we go.
Okay, recording's on. Okay, so what name would you like me to call you for the interview?
I generally go by Rachel.
Okay, great. Okay, we started out by talking about that you found a new counselor and that you told her, your female counselor, about your past, and she didn't go running screaming. That's a good sign.
No.
Because yeah, I mean, just real quick, when I said, "Oh God, I need to record you, please," and I was hoping you'd say yes, is when you started describing, that period of time when nobody believed that any of this stuff was real. I mean, just quick story to know where I'm coming from is, I remember I once went to a therapist back in the day, back in the 80s, I think it was, and I decided to rip it and just let loose, and I told the whole truth about everything that was bothering me, and they started to lock me up for observation. And I said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, obviously you must be hallucinating because none of this is real." Okay, now if I can't even get my problem acknowledged, how on earth am I going to get help? And, you remember that time. So, I mean, let's start back there. Yeah, what was that like for you?
What we had talked about was, back in the early 80s and even early 90s, you even mentioned anything more than a neighbor touched me or a stranger. Oh, no, there must be something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the very first time I tried to completely divulge what was going on, the fact that I was traveling and being taken to these places, and the therapist, I left his office. He was a school therapist. I talked to my school counselor, told her I was having some problems and I wanted to talk to somebody, so they referred me to the school therapist. And I wasn't out of his office 5 minutes, and he called my parents.
Oh, no.
And he said, something's really wrong. Is she on drugs? I really think you need to look at some more professional help. And I got home and got a thrashing because my parents, they were in their own little world. My dad traveled the world. He would be gone for a year, 2 years, sometimes at most. Sometimes he'd be gone 3 months. My mom was busy being, the perfect parent and looking lovely. She got dropped off for work in the limo, and everything was fantastic. And no, this is not reality. This does not happen in our household. And, maybe we should change schools. Maybe it's the people you're hanging out with.
Mm.
And, and it became where it's like, okay, wow, I can't tell anybody. They're just going to tell my parents. My parents don't believe me. Great. Okay. And by that point, I had already been, making money since I was 4. And I was settled in. I knew what to expect. I knew how many customers I was going to have a day, what was expected of me when I was taken off to these child auctions and bid on. I knew what was going to happen. It wasn't this, I'm having dreams or I'm having these memories. It was current life.
Right.
And
this wasn't a false memory. This was happening.
Right. It was happening right then and there. It was the bruises, the broke bones, the scars, all. And yet...
What city was this in, might I ask?
Well, that happened in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay.
But I traveled. I was in Miami, Georgia, New Orleans, Las Vegas, Denver, Colorado, L.A., San Francisco, all over the United States.
So it was everywhere.
Places. Yeah.
Okay.
What it was a group of men, and they would each select a location for the weekend or for summers, and they would all bring at least one child with them. And then we would all be put basically in a pool of whoever gets this one for this many hours, or we're going to auction this week because we want some cash, and to the highest bidder.
So this was kind of like we saw in that movie, what was it, Hostel, where they auctioned them off? It was kind of like that then.
Yeah, except, I've not watched all of Hostel. But, yeah, from my understanding, the thing is, though, is that it wasn't about killing. It was about the sexual torture and the mental torture. The oldest kid might have been 14, 15, and as young as 3 and 4. But it wasn't about killing anyone. It was about taking us to the point of pain, excruciating pain, sexually and physically, where we beg to die. And yet that wasn't going to happen because that was too good for us. So at first, right out of the gate, trying to tell somebody, trying to get help, get out. I was 13 and thought, what am I going to do? I've already had a miscarriage at this point.
At 13?
At 13.
Okay.
I don't know what I can do. And so I went to a school counselor. Now, at the time, I was only going to school. 1 year I went to school 13 days. And it's not a problem when your family name is on the library. It's not a problem when you get large donations. Oh, sure, you want your kid? Take them. Oh, we have permission for this person to come and pick you up. Come on out of class. Oh, you're not going to be back for a month? No problem.
Right. See, you also, right there, you're hitting on something I've really noticed with all predators, whether they're child molesters or rapists or whether they're traffickers. What I've noticed that predators tend to have very much in common is that they tend to be big donors, big respectable people. I mean, they tend to gather around them sort of defenses, power, that kind of thing. And part of the reason I've seen why they give an example, as you know, I mean, Michael Jackson was targeting children, so what does he do? He puts out a lot of money to children's groups for cancer, so that, of course, when he gets accused of this horrible thing, all these people rally to their defense. And that's what I've noticed all predators seem to do, is they build up these big defenses that would say, oh, no, that person would never do that. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And that seems to be what you're describing. They're donating, they're well-known, et cetera. This is, to me, it's kind of almost a danger sign, isn't it, when they're like that,
Whenever you get somebody that claims they don't have a history of any kind of abuse at all, yet they're throwing money at children's projects, it kind of gives me little, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up a little bit, like, why do you want to be so close to children? What's your issue? But, and up until 13 and 14, I never even considered that help was an option because the guy on the billboard was there. The guy sitting in his judge's robes on a daily basis was there. The cop from down the street was there. The superintendent of schools was there. So who am I going to get help from when they're
you're
showing
also
out
describing.
cash?
Yeah, I mean, you're also describing something for me is I was kept very isolated to within our world. So that to me, it was normal. As a child, we don't know. I mean, for the longest time, I thought it was normal. I mean, did they do that to you?
Definitely. Now, I had a very distinct situation happen that got me involved. Like, most people are like, I'm not really sure how it worked and how I transitioned and as far as abuse goes of how things escalated. I know. I was at a daycare school. A guy came up to the fence. He started talking to me, and I was 4 years old, and he said, "I'm supposed to take you home." And I'm like, "I don't know you." He's like, "Oh yeah, remember I was over at your house." And I remember walking to his car with him, coming out the back gate. There weren't any teachers around. Nobody. It was 82. Nobody thought that your kid was going to get grabbed from somewhere.
Oh, not in 82. No, nobody even really thought about this. No.
And I go with him. He calls my family and says, "I got your kid. I want ransom." My parents, being in the high-profile jobs they were, immediately contacted authorities.
Wow.
Authorities are
what kind of work did they do? Just curious, what kind of work did they?
They worked in government. They worked with NASA program and Star Wars program with the president.
Okay.
So, no media. We're not putting out anything that could alert anybody because we don't know the true motive. Is it really money of why he took her?
Right.
And so, because at that time, we had all of what was actually going on in world history. We were still battling. We were still amping up our nukes. We were still amping up things. We had not set aside our differences and come to a general table. So these guys, they immediately thought maybe it's because of what you all do as her parents. It's got something to do with that.
Oh, right. Yeah, we were fighting the Russians, I think, in 82, yeah.
Right. Not some guy was walking along by the daycare, saw a kid unwatched, and said, "Come here." So I was with him a week. I'm in the hospital after I'm found, and a family member walks in, gets right next to my ear and says, "If you can give it away for free to strangers, you're going to make me some money."
Wow. What relation? Uncle? What?
My grandfather.
Oh, my God. Okay.
And a week later, I was making $50 a hand job.
And how old were you again?
4.
Oh, my God. Okay.
And he was making so much money that he had a favorite magazine, and he collected them. He started putting $100 bills between the pages of the magazine and stacking them up so that I could see them. And he would tap and say, this right here, this is what you're worth.
Oh, my God. This is what you're worth?
Yeah.
Oh,
and
dear.
You could shake the magazine and $100 bills would fall out. Because he was a cash and carry business.
Right.
And so...
But he's telling you you're worth the cash, your self-worth, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, my God, you poor dear. I know how rough that is, you know?
Quite definitely.
And then, is that when you started, like, did you try to tell your parents, or what did you do at that point? Or was it normal, or, what was going on there?
I tried, but my father was already out of the country. Mom was off doing her own thing. And it just went on deaf ear, like, oh, you're just associating this person with the person and these things that happened. And, I would get petrified of tornadoes, natural disasters, and, if I thought a storm was coming, I had this idea that I'm not worthy to be alive, so I would have these panic attacks and think, this is when God's going to strike me dead because I'm such a horrible, unworthy person and have done all these horrible things.
Mm. Yeah. I hear you. I had a similar with my dad, because like with me, you know, where it really messed me up head-wise is I don't know what sex is. I don't know what normal is. I don't know anything. I just know that when he would, you know, grab me a certain way, you know, certain situations, I would feel very nauseous and I'd pull away from him. And then he would say, "What's the matter? Don't you love me?" And then he would make me feel guilty for pulling away from him, like something was wrong with me, you know, kind of thing. And it took a long time for me to understand that, you know, what was happening, and then that it wasn't wrong with me. Well, and then for a while I thought everybody did this. He goes, "Well, this is how dads show their affection." And then I start to realize, no, this is not how dads show their affection, and that's when we started having it out, you know?
Right. See, I wasn't around other people enough to realize that wasn't what was going on. I wasn't around people to know that they weren't pulled out of school because a client.
That's what I said. He kept me isolated. I mean, he kept me isolated. I don't know if you were they keeping you isolated so you didn't know the difference, you know?
Right. And that's where, like I said, wow, you know, this therapist is going to be good. She didn't bat an eye with my history and wasn't completely like, oh my goodness, you're crazy. Gaining that ability to say this is what happened is so powerful when you find somebody that it doesn't matter if they trust you, but you know they do. You know they believe you. They trust your memory. They trust what you say happened. I looked for a few weeks, and I hadn't really had the intentions anytime lately to go back and see a therapist. I had felt like I'd done my therapy work when I got my freedom and had escaped. There was a whole situation where part of my spinal column was damaged. I was paralyzed from the waist down, and a surgery that should have taken an hour took 6. And thankfully there was a nurse in there that started documenting scars, bruises, former broke bones that healed on their own. All of these things that they were seeing in these scans, in these, just cutting me open and trying to fix. You know, a kid doesn't, even at 17, 18, 19, they don't just, not being in a car accident, not being in a major fall, not being in anything, come into an emergency room with part of their spinal column crushed.
Right. And this is another thing that's very common with us that you hit on, is that so many of us are disabled because of the damage done to us. I mean, what happened to damage? I mean, how old were you and what happened?
Well, I was 19, and a group of guys paid, and I got just beaten, just completely battered, and they were sexually violent. They were into using tools and knives and wheeling in this tool case to use for torture and staying for days. When I couldn't walk and no one could fix it, that's when, oh shit, we got to take her to the hospital. And thankfully this nurse is like, no one can come in, and called the police, called social services, called the police, and got everyone banned from the hospital. I immediately went from there into victim services. It took me 6 months to be able to stand up. It took me a year to be able to walk, maneuver, get in a car. And part of victim services was, you need therapy. This is your job. And I did therapy 40 hours a week. between.
That's another thing. Therapy is
three,
a full-time job, isn't it? I mean, you're
yeah.
in one doctor after the other. It is a full-time job. Yeah.
I was doing multiple sessions a week, all the homework, trying to do a group, trying all of these things, and, you know, even just the trying self-management, relaxation, CDs and cassettes even still, and all of this work. It was a job, and they
Yep.
had me in school, and I was able to go to college and able to figure out that I could do something and be something. It was a full-time job.
Was that because of victim services, though? Was that because of victim services you were able to get to school and all this rehab? Yeah, I mean, I love victim services.
Vocational rehabilitation. I'm a huge advocate for them. They do such good work. I would not be alive. This beyond the actual what the nurse did to get me out. I would not have survived the healing process had it not been for the therapist I had. I mean, hands down, I truly, if there was a way, you know, knighthood, sainthood, because she was there 24/7. When I would go on binge drinking, when I would just start walking down the railroad tracks, muttering to myself that maybe a train will come and that's the best I can do, she was right there. And she didn't have a problem if my roommate, my friend, called her and said, Rachel's freaking out. Can you talk to her? And, I mean, when I first started, I would sleep in a corner, backed into a corner, sitting fully clothed, even with a coat on, in 90-degree weather.
Oh, gosh, I did that too. Yeah.
In the corner, lights on, and I'd sleep 10 to 15 minutes. And I was awake. Hypervigilant.
Right.
And it finally, the therapist taught me that it was okay to sleep in a bed, and it was going to be safe, and to sleep for hours. And she gave me my first hug that I actually truly felt like no one expected anything from me in return. And taught me that it was okay to have positive relationships, that I didn't need to sleep with everybody, that I didn't need to do things, spend money like crazy. It literally was like parent that I never had, / therapist, / spiritual guide, / everything. My total world was recreated in that time. And so recently, you mentioned disability. I work full time. But I recently started having some really bad cramping and some really periods, missed periods, hemorrhaging between periods. Just it was really strange. So I went in and saw my gynecologist and found out that they, on the ultrasounds, they saw saw some scarring, and I already I'd known that my ovaries had been damaged, and knew that I couldn't have children. Well, she went in and did a DNC and found that it was scar tissue that had broken off and was blocking an ovary and had caused this endometriosis. Because of the scar tissue, tried to clear everything out, came back within 2 weeks, had to go see an oncologist, found out through testing that I had cancer, ended up having a total hysterectomy. Mid-30s, knew because of what had happened when I was a kid that probably couldn't have kids, just all of the violence in general, the forced miscarriages, really was pretty certain, but there was still hope, like maybe, God's miracle, and had to have a total hysterectomy. Took everything.
Oh, dear.
And seeing a specialist and going through everything, I freaked out on the operating table as they were putting me to sleep. Because I was talking to the anesthesiologist, not paying attention. The nurse taped my hand down to the table. Started having flashbacks.
Right.
Immediately could not pull it together. Took 30 extra minutes just to calm me down enough to start surgery. Get done with surgery, and the doctor's like, what happened? And I said, was having flashbacks. So then I tell her my history. So she goes back to the files, comes back the next morning and says, we can tell you for 100% certain that you had this because of what happened. Now I'm thinking, I've been out of therapy, I'm successful, done a doctorate, finished school, great career, own a home, have a great family, and here I am back where I was when I was a kid. What they did to me took something else away. It doesn't matter whether or not I could have had children. It was a possibility. Now, there's not at all.
And you're not at all unique. Many of the women report to you that they're so messed up inside from the damage that they've been robbed of that ability to have children,
Well, and that, as I'm sitting in ICU in a hospital, Johnny, talking to my oncologist, I said to her, I said, you know why I didn't tell you my history? Because never once on any single piece of paperwork I filled out before I came to see you or since I started treatment, did you ever ask me if I was even ever molested? I said, so how do I bring up a conversation of, I was trafficked as a child for almost 2 decades. How do I bring that up when you don't even have a place for me to say I was sexually abused, I was molested, I was raped? Nothing in anything you have opened a door for me to feel comfortable enough to tell you that. And she sat there and she looked at me and she said, I've been doing this for 30 years. And I get referrals, and I never think about it. I just do the surgeries, and I've never in my 30 years had somebody wake up and freak out the way you did. And I said, there are so many people like me, and I will guarantee you there are people like me that will never come to you, will never go to a gynecologist because it freaks them out. But if they knew that you would listen and that you would treat them with dignity and respect, they would get treatment. They wouldn't let it fester. And I mean, I'm on a support group on Facebook, and 90% of the women are like, I'll just write it out on medication because I don't want to talk to my doctor.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't want to tell them that something happened to me that they might not understand. So I'll just take medicine.
Now, you had something really, really pivotal that happened to me with the HIV, because we had that HIV epidemic in the 80s. And what happened was, of course, it was raging within the sex industry, and nobody would get tested. Nobody would go to a doctor. So what happened was, I went to, Tom Bradley was mayor in L.A. then, and Sheriff Black, remember Sheriff Black was the sheriff. And I went to them and I said, look, you're not going to get anybody to go to the doctor and get tested, et cetera, especially the transgenders. Because the transgenders, really don't leave the house. Because back then the transgenders looked a lot like guys in a dress, right? And I said, you're just not. I said, now, however, I said, if you put the word out that you've got a special place that they can go where they're going to be around other sex workers, you know, other people who understand them, I said, you will be packed, you know, and they said, go for it. We put together a team, and I said, but, I said, we need to offer them immunity, and we need to offer them anonymity, and we need to offer them resources. I said, you cannot ask a prostitute to quit prostituting and then not give them rent or a place to live or food. I said, so I need resources. And we put together a board. We had HUD give us housing. We had social services give us like food stamps and medical. And there was no insurance back then. I said, I need insurance. I need food. I need housing. I said, if you give me a package that I can offer them, I said, trust me. I said, we will get testing. We will get them out. So sure enough, we had a site set up. It was the beginning of AIM, the AIM clinic. And we found Dr. Sharon was actually in porn still then, Sharon Mitchell. And she got her doctorate degree and, you know, but what we did is we got all the ex-sex workers out there that we could, train them, put the word out on the streets. We put out ads in all the trade papers. You know, we put the word out on the streets that these are all ex-sex workers. You have immunity and we have resources. We were packed. And I mean.
Oh, absolutely.
And once they knew that it was us there, they were lined up. I mean, they wanted to see the doctor. They wanted to get tested. And especially when they knew they weren't going to be laughed at by some nurse, you know.
Bingo.
That was it. And
I don't want somebody looking at me like, oh, I know what you did. Wow.
Oh, that look. Oh, my God, that look where they look down their nose at you. Yeah.
And my whole thing is that, you know, I flippantly, even at a couple conferences I've been to, have been like, yeah, I got prostituted when I was a kid. Oh, you say the P word? And they're like, oh. And I'm like, yes, it's okay. I didn't just become an alien. You know, and yes, I'll tell you, when I lost my job when I was 30, totally crossed my mind that I knew something I was really good at.
Yeah.
I could be the one making money for once.
Mm-hmm.
You know, thankfully I was only unemployed for like 3 months and got unemployment in. But those are things that still as an adult, it's like, I know what I can always fall back on.
Well, see, now you hit on why I don't make a distinction. Well, see, now you hit on why I do not make a distinction between trafficking voluntary, and you hit it right on the head, is because the experience that I hear often is that they were trafficked when they were young, but then they get disabled. And then because they're disabled, they have trouble finding work, and then, you know, and then guess what? They wind up in some situation where they go, I know how to make money. And then they go into it voluntarily. So there seems to be, which is why I don't make a distinction, because we can go in and out of traffic, non-traffic, you know, and it varies all the time, you know. I've seen them go back into it voluntarily just for a little while to pay the rent, and then I've seen them get snatched up by a pimp and they're trafficked again. I mean, so it just kind of goes back and forth.
See, and that's where I was, and oddly enough, you know, because I was still like, because I, you know, was telling a friend of mine yesterday, I'm like, fundamentally, I don't know if Jody and I view trafficking and prostitution the same way, because I still kind of feel like there's it's illegal, but there are people that's just what they want to do, and it's worked out for them.
Yeah.
I was listening last night because I was like, okay, what am I getting myself into? So I listened to a couple of your shows, you know, because I can't sleep. That's why I was trying to find a counselor, because I'm back to having nightmares from surgery, and it stirred up a bunch of stuff. So if I'm not sleeping, I might as well be doing something. So I listened to Polly's, and you know, and she's like, oh well, yeah, I was abused, and I'm like, okay, now I understand. Now I see why there's not totally that distinction, because I've always thought if you're a grown adult and you've chosen to do this, you've chosen to do it. It's not trafficking because you've chosen to do it. It's your career field. I choose to be in counseling as my career field. I choose to work with at-risk boys because I try to teach them respect that they never learned. And, you know, I try and teach them how to respect women. Well, you know, that's my chosen career field. Well, they've chosen prostitution. And then it's like, oh, back up. Why did they choose it? Oh, that's because that's the only thing they knew they were good at, because no one let them find out they were good at other things. Oh, they chose that because they didn't ever get a chance to get education and get career training so that they could do something else. This is the easy fix because they've always been abused or hurt or manipulated by someone. This is what's there. Okay. Now I can buy into the idea that trafficking covers voluntary prostitution, given a person's history.
Right, because
you know,
for me, that's true. When you really intellectually dive into what is the definition of force, it can get deep because, I mean, is it really a choice when you don't have any other economic options? Is it a choice when you're disabled and you're flat on your back and you have no other options? I mean, there are some situations where is it really a choice? Because in my book, to have a choice, you have to have an option. And, you know, and so this is where I get kind of angry sometimes because then that's used against us, where they say, well, the person chose it, therefore they wanted it, and they get kind of, and then there's a story of Vanessa. I remember Vanessa because her story to me, I think, illustrated why I don't want all the judgments about whether it was voluntary. Because this is my big argument. You know what? Even on one of my biggest arguments right now in the trafficking field, and that's that there seems to be this I don't know what to call it, but there seems to be some group that will say, if you were forced to do it, we'll forgive you. It's okay. But if you did it voluntarily, then you're this horrible, monstrous person. And then what happens is I see the prostitutes then feel like they have to apologize for when they did make the choice, or like it was something bad about that choice. Now, Vanessa's story to me, I think, illustrated it so beautifully because she tells the story of in the 60s. She was, 60th generation. Everybody used to party, et cetera, free love, San Francisco. She was partying, and next thing she knows, she's literally handcuffed to a bed. Now, she spent a year in this hotel room, evidently, handcuffed to a bed. And the tricks would come in, and to keep her quiet and sedate, this biker gang, kept drugging her. Now, at the end of a year, she's physically addicted, obviously, after a year of being injected with these drugs. There was a fire in the hotel. The fire actually got her out. The police came. They set her free. Well, okay, she's free now. I mean, literally, she said she had a pair of shorts, a tube top, no shoes, no ID, no money. She now has a drug habit, and the police patted her on the head and said, "You're free now." "Oh, I'm free now." "Okay, now what?" And then they looked at her and said, "Well, you're free." The police said, "You can go." Where does she go? I mean, and then all of a sudden she says that of course, her drug habit, I mean, all of a sudden she's realizing she needs to get high, and physically she's got no place to live. She has no money, no idea. She said she didn't even have shoes, so she said to herself, you know what? I bet I can go in the bar right here, and I bet I can get me a place to stay tonight and some food. And
there you go.
She then went to, and then again, what else is she? Now, a lot of people would say, "Oh, she chose it at that point," and I mean, well, what else would you do in that situation? I mean, and she worked her way out of it. I mean, and then the horrible thing is, she was trying to work her way out of it. She said she was saving up for money. She was going to school, and then John went crazy when she insisted he wear a condom, and he literally crushed her face in at this point and gave her HIV. Now, at this point, she's got facial reconstructive surgery going on. She's got HIV. She has, how is she supposed to work? So she says to me, what am I going to do? She said, my HIV medication's for $10,000 a month. What do I do? I've got a face full of bandages, 10 grand worth of medication to survive. What do I do? I mean, what do you do at that point? So she got into doing the dominatrix stuff so she didn't have to have sexual contact. But I can't fault her for that decision. Not being in that position, No, so I get kind of upset with this whole idea of, well, those people who chose it, there's something wrong with them. It's all different. Now there are people who it is a career option to them. They're happy with it. They do have options. They've got degrees. They could go do other. Power to you, honey. If that what makes you happy, go for it. That's the way I look at it. And I feel like there's trafficking in any field, whether it's waitressing, farming, manufacturing. There's trafficking in every field, which also means legal prostitution is the same. There's trafficking in the legal brothels. There's women there that are being forced to work.
Yes.
So, which is that press conference I gave in 2007, is that this is another reason why I push for federal recognition, is because another thing that was happening, you're talking about how vital victim services was for you. But here's what I was seeing, is I was seeing that two things would happen with these predators. I would see that when a child molester or a rapist or whatever the abuse was, I would see that they would know that there was a loophole. And that loophole would be that if they could make that victim a prostitute, then their testimony was immediately discounted. Immediately. Oh, she's a prostitute, and then everything stopped. And that case was very pivotal because that case of the Hillside Strangler is what founded Children of the Night and me, because what happened was all the prostitutes were going to the police and saying, these guys are over here. But what they were doing was they were, again, handcuffing these women to a bed in a motel room, forcing them to turn a trick, which would make them a prostitute. And at that point, the police would say, oh, game over. I can't get a warrant. I can't get testimony. I can't do anything. And they would walk away until literally they started murdering straight girls, non-prostitutes. I mean, that's ridiculous. Okay, we got a loophole here. And that's that these predators know if they make you a prostitute, they get off the hook. Then Victim Services says, you asked for this, so therefore we're not going to pay for your rehab. Whoa! So this is why, one, I wanted to get decriminalization so that all victims are treated equally, whether they're prostitutes or not. And then also why I wanted to get federal recognition so that Victim Services pays for everybody. Just because you get a label prostitute doesn't mean you don't get shit. I mean, everybody gets it. So, because that's what I was seeing, is that they were making us prostitutes to basically get off the hook.
See, it's really interesting you said that, because from 14 to 18, I wouldn't have told a soul because I was convinced I was choosing what was going on. Because what happened literally at 14, where I would have been too old to be in their little traveling circus of chaos, it started becoming, you can volunteer to take that kid's punishment. You can volunteer to take that kid's client. You can volunteer to do the things that that guy wants to do, so I would. Because in my mind, I'm like, okay, if that other child does not experience what I've experienced, it's helping them. So I would volunteer. Well, then, I've asked for it. I've chosen. And it wasn't, I was probably 25 when a light bulb came off one day and went, wait a minute, how is that a choice? Be beaten senseless or volunteer to be gang raped? What's the choice? That's not a true choice. And never understood that, because all I was seeing was I volunteered. I shook my chain, I asked for permission to speak, and I volunteered. So it's my fault that it happened. It's my fault that I lost a child. It's my fault that these things were done because I volunteered. And did not grasp the reality of nowhere in that situation, nowhere in that environment did I have any power or control whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
If they wanted to starve me for days, they did. If they wanted to give me a cap of water an hour as my only nourishment, that's what happened. If somebody decided they wanted to come in and just piss on me, that is what happened. It didn't matter. It was treated like an animal, lived in a cage for a while, an actual dog cage. And in my mind, I chose it because I didn't want kids at 4 and 5 years old that were brought in crying, trembling, scared to death to have to go in those rooms.
Right.
And so it became my fault, and it was completely my fault. And I didn't need services. I shouldn't get services. The caveat was that how I got handed over to victim services and the damage that was done and the fact that doctors were writing these reports and saying, we've examined her, we've done these workups, and there's a lot of counseling needs here. And even though I was saying, I don't need anything, just leave me alone. You know, I have a friend that's given me a car, I'll just go live in my car, just leave me alone. And this case manager's like, no. You've been through some shit, at least go meet this counselor one time. And I went. And I was like, okay, I'll come back. And then kept going. And then stuck with, oh, you want me to fill out 5 forms so that I can get my rent paid for the month? Okay. Oh, you want me to prove that I got an A in this class so you'll keep paying for classes? Okay. Oh, I need glasses. I can only go to this eye doctor. It's going to take a whole day away from school and work to go to the eye doctor, but you're paying for the glasses? Okay, I'll go.
Right.
A lot of people won't do it.
Right. Well, I mean, this is where I think
like,
our group's been really helpful. Well, see, you hit on something else, too. Is one of the biggest things that I think we do, or our members do, is that we walk with them. We go with them. And
right.
my experience has been a lot of times they're afraid to leave the house alone. We've had a lot of members who've been kidnapped on the street, and so they're terrified even leaving the house. You know, they're terrified what someone's going to say to them. So what we do is we go with them. We pick them up. We hold their hand. We accompany them. We give them a sense of safety. You know, we go to the doctor with them, and we go into court with them, and all we do is just be there, and that gets it done. But if they were left alone to their own devices, sometimes they're too afraid to even leave the house. You know?
Right.
So, I mean, that's the thing I see. This is what aggravates the hell out of me is when they'll do something like hand them a form, a list of phone numbers, and go, here you go, and then cut them loose. It's like, that's like Greek to them. They're not, some of them are dyslexic. Some of them can't read. Some of them, their anxiety's too high. I mean, I've seen literally, you hand them a list of numbers, you might as well tell them to jump off a cliff. They can't do it. You know, they need somebody to physically go with them and walk them through the process, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's one thing we do.
You know, and it's rewarding, though, to be able to walk with somebody through that process.
Yeah.
And see that they have control of their life now.
Well, see, that's one of the things I think healing for us that I've experienced is because what I find is that we have to transition from victim to survivor, whatever the situation is. And what I've seen happen through our 12-step process, through our group, is that that's what happens. Is we start to reach out and help the other person, we then transition from the victim to the survivor. And then we're the one taking him to the doctor. We're the one taking him into court. We're the one taking him on the job interview. And then I remember I watched how victims of, like, say, big plane crashes, for example, they take them back to the site. And they have them go back to the site of the trauma as an adult so that they can realize that they have moved on. And this is what I see happening with our members, is that when they start reaching out to help the other one, that's when they start to realize that they're not a victim any longer, you know?
You know, I would challenge you to reframe the survivor to thriver.
That's an interesting idea.
Because for me, it's totally me. I was a victim. I became a survivor as I was healing, and I was able to get my life together. I became a thriver when I stepped out of needing to be a victim, needing the constant help just to function and get myself together, to being able to turn around and help others, to mentor younger survivors, to go to those places with them and help them, but it's not triggering me. It's not putting me back into survival mode. I'm thriving. I'm thriving because I'm moving forward on my journey.
Right.
Because there's a stigma behind survivor. I think there's a negative stigma because people think survivor and they immediately go, oh, well, they were a victim.
Right.
And for me, thriving and being a thriver, which is probably really not a word, but that's neither here nor there. It's not part of my dissertation, so I don't know about it. If I'm going one step beyond, I become the community.
Well, we've got to find a language because up until very recently, the only word that I had was recovery. And that's because, of course, we got our model from NA. So up until a few years ago, I would talk about our members that had left the business entirely. I just put it this way. They've left the business entirely. They're off drugs. They're together. I would just say that they're a recovering member. And then so many people have jumped on me about this that I've just started using the word survivor because a lot of people have said to me, and true, that not all of the members are recovering addicts or recovering alcoholics. So, you know, so far we just kind of, but again, you know, then you're right. The word survivor implies a victim status. So, I mean, I sit here and I go, well, what the hell do I call us? You know? So, I mean, we need better language on this, you know?
Right. We need inclusive language also because it can happen to anybody. It does not matter. Because that was the huge piece that I touched on with you last night when we were texting. I saw the little after-school specials and saw the commercials and the news, and I did not look like the kids they were pulling out of abusive situations.
Oh, me either. My dad worked for the gas company. My mom was a stenographer. I didn't look like I came out of a victimized home, you know?
Bingo. We were not in poverty. My parents both made 6 figures a year each. We had the big screen TV. We had the chauffeur. We had the private school education. I had the private school education. We went on these vacations. My grandparents owned a small island in international waters. There was no poverty. There was no, but it's not cool whenever they use it for their sex islands and sell children from it.
Well, that was another problem I had seeking help is that people the only help that I was finding was for somebody who came out of a impoverished home like you're describing, which I didn't.
Right.
My dad worked for the gas company. My mom was a stenographer. We lived in the Middle Age. Everything. My grandmother owned a restaurant. I mean, so I didn't come from there. And then when I started really wanting help to get out of the situation I was in, I kept being referred to drug programs. I didn't use drugs. I mean, it was like, why was there nothing available? Which is the reason why I started the group is that there had to be something that wasn't about classifying us as mentally ill or drug addicts or needing to learn to read. I mean, there had to be something for us out there, you know?
Well, and I got sent to an AA meeting one time victim services is like, you have to go to an AA meeting. And I'm like, fine. I came back and I'm like, I'm not a quitter. And I drink to numb the flashbacks.
Right.
I don't just go sit in a bar. I carry alcohol. When I start having flashbacks, I drink because it numbs them and it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an alcoholic.
No.
That's not an alcoholic. And it infuriated them that I would, like, say, I don't need to go to NA. I don't need to go to AA. I don't need to go. My parents were not alcoholics. They're not drug addicts. We had a bar that never was touched. There was no, when company came over, a bartender served people. When there were not drugs in the house.
I know, which is what angered me about this viewpoint, that we're all addicts. No, we're not. Now, maybe we use drugs. I've had the cops and the judges say, but you're using drugs. And I'm like, we're self-medicating. We are not addicts.
Yeah, self-medicating is not addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. And therefore, when they're trying to give it, well, that's the thing. And then when they try to give us drug treatment, that's not what we need. And then they're saying that we're not getting the program. We're not getting the program. And my argument is because we're not addicts. We're self-medicating. You know? Yeah, we need something different.
See, whenever I was talking to this counselor this morning, I'm like, okay, you going to send me off to, and she's like, no, I'm not going to send you off anywhere. We're going to work on the fact that all of a sudden after 20 years, you're having nightmares because of this surgery. I'm like, okay, I can handle that. You know, and I told her, I said, the only reason I'm giving you a full spectrum of my history is because that's what the nightmares are about. And she said, I understand that, and that's cool. And I said, okay, we're good. You know, and I immediately, on the way out, was texting some friends, and I said, she wasn't judgmental. She didn't care about what I'd been through. She totally got that my past is important because of the content of the nightmares, not because I'm not functioning, not because I'm not successful. It's just right now that's what stirred up. I think this is going to go well. And, you know, when my friends were like, excellent, great. And so, you know, I think overall the piece that I would say, especially for your listeners, is you don't have to look like the poster child. Abuse comes in every single form anyone is susceptible. No matter who you are, where you live, who your parents are, who you know, you're susceptible. And it's okay to get help and to know that, well, I might not like this person, I'll try somebody else. As long as you're trying, and every day you take a step forward, even if it's a baby step. And the step today is, I got out of bed. That's a step. That's moving forward from what happened. Some days you can make huge steps. Some days you can talk in front of a conference of people. You can mentor somebody. You can go with somebody to court. You can share your story with somebody new. But not every day has to be that. You take over your destiny by one step at a time.
Yeah. I mean, this is, okay, you also keyed into something that has been, because I've had people recently ask me, why am I so adamant about, you know, taking down these frauds lately, these fraudulent, you know, they call them fraudulent survivors, like Somali mans, et cetera. And I'll tell you what I really think like 80% of my problem, in a sense, with the Somali mans is that they present an image to the public of what we are. And I have found that these people are extremely functional. They're always fine. They're normal, you know, and then what I find happen is, so you gotta realize I've been involved in this since, you know, 87 when I started through. So when I would go out and meet people, I would be representing a survivor, which means that I have good days, I have bad days. I'm not perfect. Some days I'm a three-headed demon with my head spinning around. I mean, some days I'm out there. and some days I'm a lovely person. I mean, but as a true survivor, when people look at me, they understand what survivors are, or whatever we're going to call them. I mean, yeah, we've got to find a better word. But then when the fakes come out, they're functional, they're stable, they're happy, they're not us. And then what I've been finding is that since they started coming out, we got federal recognition in 2007, which means now there's money in it. Well, now there's money in it. Now the fakes are coming out, and the fakes are functional. And then they're not us. And so now what I'm finding happening is that people are turning around to me and going, well, why are you not acting like Somali ma'am? And I would say, because I'm not, because we're not. Yeah. That's the fake. That's not us. But there's so many of them lately that I'm finding that people are seeming to have a certain expectation, which is why I'm fighting very, very hard through this radio show, by the way. Is one of the ways that I'm doing that. Is I'm trying to get more information out about what we really are so that we can counter some of these myths, because that's another thing I'm hearing is that, people are doing it to a lot of us. Well, why aren't you acting like that person? Well, that's not us. We do have days when we're not together. Yeah, we might have a job, we might have a degree, but then you and I both know that even though we might have a job and degree and a house, that you and I have got some days when maybe we can't get out of bed or comb our hair. Right. And that's normal for us. For us, that's normal. So I'm trying to do that with the show, is get more information out about us. Is that, you're talking about, you're working and in school, but, you're saying the same thing. You have days when maybe you can't comb your hair either,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There are days where I'm like, all right, I made it to the front room. That's the progress. Sit down, I'm watching TV.
Yeah.
Or, good job, you went to the restroom and opted for not just staying in bed and peeing on yourself. Those are good. I've had those days. Some of those.
Yep. I'm laughing because I've had them too.
Yeah. So,
yep.
you're doing great work. Just you got to get the information out and get people knowing that there are resources. And there's change. It's slow, but there's change. And people are paying attention. They really are paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. They really are. And a lot more people are paying attention than they're maybe letting on. Because I love it. I get a lot of phone calls from people who tell me what they really think, but they would never say it publicly because, it's still a little bit unpopular in some circles, and that's okay.
Oh, yes.
We're getting there, though. Yeah. You're right. We're absolutely getting there. I mean, you contrasted back in, the early 80s, people didn't even believe it was real. Okay, now we've got to the real. Now it's becoming a question of, this is my argument with this whole show on 8 Minutes. Because now the argument, and why I've lashed out of this show so hard, is that now the question is, what is it? And when they put that fake show up there about what trafficking is, and I'm angry, I will tear that show down, which is what I did. Because no, that's not reality. Damn it, I have fought all this time for the reality of this to get out there. God damn it, that's not reality. Take it down and show the reality, Which is good and bad. I've got the sex workers I get the sex workers acting like trafficking doesn't exist at all, and then I get these church people that act like all prostitution is trafficking. No, you're both wrong. It's a mix. Like any industry, like the restaurant industry, like the farming industry, it is a mix, And let's get some reality out there, because again, I run into people who see this fantasy crap and listen to this fantasy crap, and then they hold it on us and expect us to be like that, And I have people that will do that. They'll say, well, isn't it like the show I saw on TV? No, it's not. So we've got to get more reality out there,
It's perpetuating what I was seeing when I was being trafficked and didn't think, that's me, so I can't get help.
That's my other thing. When they say that, when they said at the end of the show that we can't get them help, that's when I got mad and I wanted to burn something down, because there is help. There are groups out there. They're lying. There is help. There are groups. There are people.
Exactly.
The only people that say there's not help are people that want to get money for it. You know, those are the only ones that are saying help doesn't exist. They're the people trying to get donations, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, and I've got friends from all over the world, social workers and counselors, that'll call me and they'll say, I got this kid. Can you talk to them? The first thing in my brain isn't, do they have insurance? Are they going to pay me $50, you know, or $100 an hour for my time? No, do they want to call me or do they want me to call them?
Mhm.
I will do anything I can.
Yep.
That's what it comes down to is if you really want help, someone will help you.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think we could probably discuss this for the next year and still have more to talk about.
Yeah, we can always do another parter. I mean, yeah. What would you like to end on? What would you like to tell? What would you like to get out there to our listeners? And maybe we could do another interview too and do more some other time. But what would you like to get out there?
I would say keep at it one step at a time. Find someone you trust, whether it's a therapist, a counselor, a mentor, someone in the program. Find someone that you trust that on those days when you don't feel like you can get out of bed, that you can text them, call them, send up a signal somehow and just say, it's not a good day. And that they will be there if you need them, but aren't going to try and fix you because you're not, you feel broke, but you're fixable. We're all under construction, no matter how much we feel like we've all got it together. We're all under construction. Mm-hmm. And just reach out. There are good people in the world. There truly are good people in the world. You just got to find them through all the muck.
Well, you know, that's awesome to see that you've gone through that, you know, and you feel that way.
I appreciate the opportunity to come and hang out with you for a while.
I'm so glad you came and talked, and I'm so impressed that through everything you went through, you realize that there's good people out there and that you're trying to help others. That is so awesome. You're a modern day hero, Rachel. You really are. You know.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and hopefully, you know, your listeners can actually, you know, if they want to contact me or anything, they can do that through you, and I will gladly get in touch with them if they'd like, just for anonymity purposes. And the community I'm in, I generally just continue to utilize the name that I used when I was traveling, and because small communities don't necessarily have all the great resources. And so as I'm trying to educate these folks, I keep the two still a little separate just to make sure that my previous endeavors don't threaten my current career or education, and folks don't have a conniption realizing that they're elbow to elbow with somebody that has, slept with a small village worth of people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely there are people whose attitudes towards us change when they find out, so we do have to be selective.
Yep. So I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you soon.
Yeah, and anybody who wants to talk to you, I will put in touch with you after I've screened them, and thank you so much. We'll talk again soon, okay?
Thank you.
All right, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.